We're going to go ahead and get started then.
By the time we will get all, everything will be Oh, you have to give me your cards,
Yes.
lady. Oh,
Okay.
All right, good.
sorry.
All right.
Because John was saying, there are times when we can't do something.
Okay. Thanks, Dominic. Glad that you are there. We're going to be talking more about listings today. And going over a little bit more about what we did last week. We're going to do a little role play today because your very favorite thing, isn't it? Role play is just so beneficial because it takes us out of our comfort zone into actually a greater comfort zone. You just don't realize it yet. Okay. Those are for you.
And Debbie just,
Okay.
two-step listing.
Okay. Gabriella, since Noe is, will you be my seller today?
Sure.
Will you be the seller? Okay. We're going to do a little role play about what you're going to do when you are meeting a seller and talking about listing a property. Remember the other day I said that we teach a two-trip method because it really is ideal. Hi, Debbie.
I'm sorry, lady.
You're just fine. We just started. I know that you will shortcut that to one trip eventually, but really and truly the purpose is, you'll find out in a few minutes when we look at the comps, why it's important to be able to know what's in a house before you start trying to determine the value of that property. So as a newbie in the business, I think it's important to make your first trip a reconnaissance mission. You're going to go, introduce yourself, create some rapport, find out about that seller's needs, do your homework then once you get that information and come back and be fully prepared to explain to the seller the price range that you've got with you because of the comps that you've done and the homework that you've done. Going back to the office after you've been there gives you an opportunity to really do your homework and be prepared to present to the seller what you think the ideal price range is for that property. Okay, so we're at the first meeting. I don't know Gabriella, but we've talked on the phone and set up an appointment, and I'm here and I'm going to stand at the door right at the appointed time, ring the doorbell, step back because you want to be out of somebody's space, have your card ready so that your card is facing them. And when they answer the door and open the screen, if there's a screen, introduce yourself and say, I'm Marsha Richardson, or whatever your name is. I'm here for an appointment today that we set up for 10 o'clock. However you want to say it. The thing about doing role play, the thing about scripts, the thing about all of the things that you learn is that you're going to internalize the important things, but you're going to say them back in your own way. And that's what you want to do. You want to make it who you are and how you do your business, because everybody's different. And that's a good thing, because all of the buyers and sellers out there don't want to work with one kind of person. They want to work with somebody that they're comfortable with. And there are as many different types of agents as there are buyers and sellers, and some work well with some people and others work better maybe. So it's very important to, I think, understand that all you have to do is give information, and that's what your goal and your purpose is. Provide information, give some guidance, help them make decisions. The important thing to remember, it's not your decision to make. They're the ones that own the property, or they're the ones that are going to buy the property, and they have to be the ones to make those decisions. So anyway, I've knocked at the door and I've handed my card to Gabriella, and okay, and said that I'm here for the appointment, Gabriella. So
Wonderful.
good.
Come on in. Would
Thank
you like to
you.
go into the living room?
No, could we go into the kitchen instead? Would that be okay with you if we sit
Yeah.
in your kitchen?
Sure. Come
Okay.
on in.
Is that a comfortable place for you?
Yes, it is.
Great. Okay, it's the best place for me. Do you want a higher chair?
No, that's
Okay.
maybe
Go
this
ahead,
will go
yes,
up.
continue.
Okay. All right. So you have a lovely home,
Oh, thank you.
and I love this neighborhood.
Oh, yes. It's
How
been
long-
wonderful.
Has it?
Yes.
How long have you lived here?
25 years.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Was it a new neighborhood when you moved here?
You know what? Yes, it was. A few houses, and then it built up, and
I think you know.
raised our daughter here, and now we're ready to, let someone else have this wonderful home that we have.
Oh, good. What attracted you to this house or this neighborhood?
It was sorry, oh, that's okay. Good point. Turn off your phone, right?
Yeah, turn off your phone.
It was a school system. We just loved being in this school district.
Oh, okay.
We love the school. Our daughter thrived there. And
Right.
really nice teachers.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Schools are important then. Okay, so what is prompting you to sell now?
My daughter moves down south, and we would like to sell our home now and move closer to where she is.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Are you working with an agent down in the area where she is?
No, I'm not.
Okay. We can talk about that later. If you would like some help finding somebody, I can personally interview agents down in that area.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
And
We really would like that.
okay, great. All right. We'll talk about that a little bit later then. So, going to sit at your kitchen table. And what we're doing right now is creating rapport. I'm trying to make her feel comfortable. I'm trying to find out a little bit about her. Until she knows how much I care about her, she doesn't care a thing about me until she feels comfortable that I care about you. Okay? So that's our goal too. We want to make people feel that we really are concerned about what's going on in their lives and who they are, so on and so forth. Okay. Okay. I lost my whole train of thought. How soon do you need to move?
We'd like to be down there within the next 45 days if we could.
Oh, okay. All right. It probably is doable. The market is moving pretty quickly right now. We have more buyers than we have sellers, so people are kind of stacked up waiting for the next right property to come along.
Oh, wonderful.
So that timing is good. I would imagine that your house would probably sell within the first couple of weeks, and then we have a 30-day escrow. So
Oh, wow.
that should be work right into your time period.
Mhm.
I actually have a little.
Is it okay to make that kind of, it's almost like a promise, is it okay to make that kind of promise? That it would sell in 2 to 3 weeks?
Well, I think if you have some idea about the house and the area or the neighborhood, and how quickly the market is moving. In today's market, and I know right now, 2 weeks is about how long things are staying on the market, if they're staying on for a long time. Vinny had something that, Vinny, didn't you have one that sold the same day that you put it on the market?
Yeah.
Do you think that was unusual, or people are just waiting?
No, I think I mean, if things are priced right in this market, they're selling within 4 to 5 days usually.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you don't want to make promises. And that's a good point. You don't want to get somebody all pumped up that you can do all of these wonderful things when you really can't. And if it's a situation, maybe it's a higher priced home, there aren't as many buyers. And one of the things that we'll be talking about is a pyramid. And if you think about a pyramid, wider at the bottom, very narrow at the top, and most of the buyers are going to be in the lower part of that pyramid. The higher the prices go up that pyramid, the fewer buyers you have. And so for our higher priced properties, it does take longer to sell them. But anything that's going to be in this area, a move around price where most people can move around is going to be your medium price range. And right now, would you say about 290 mids, 300?
Well, I think our actual median price is about 220, but
Oh, do you?
you know,
Okay.
I think we sell a lot in that.
Yeah.
I mean, almost everything goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So knowing where your market is, or what's happening within that price range market, and when you've done your homework before you go, you should have some idea about what's happening locally. Okay, locally meaning in that neighborhood, that part of town, so on and so forth. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what my purpose is today. I want to come and take a look at your home. The way I like to work is to look at the house so that I can know everything about the house, or as much as possible, go back to my office and really compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, knowing what your property is like so I can compare it to the right properties and come up with the best price range for you. And I think the only way to effectively do that is to actually see it. I need to know if you've made any capital improvements, condition, that kind of thing. And then I can go back and do a really good job for you in coming up with a price range and a market plan. So I probably will spend maybe 15, 20 minutes today and then come back with all of my homework prepared later, either today or tomorrow, whichever might work best for you.
Okay, yeah, how about tonight? My husband will be home and.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a question I was going to ask, if everybody who's on title could be here when we meet again. That way all the decision makers are there and we can get whatever paperwork we might want to do at that time.
Yes.
Done. Okay, good, excellent. Okay, so tell me a little bit more. Have you made any capital improvements to your property?
Yes, we landscaped the front and the back. We replaced all the flooring within the last 5 years.
Okay.
Around the last 3 years or so, we've upgraded the bathrooms with new vanities and all that, and flooring.
Okay.
And then we did the kitchen a couple of years ago also.
Okay. Okay. So you've done a lot to it through the years.
Yes.
Keeping it updated and so on and so forth. That's very good. In a few minutes, I'll ask you if you'll take me on a tour
Oh, sure.
And I'll make some notes about what I see, and if I have any recommendations, I'll make some notes about that, and we can talk about anything later on.
Sure.
But what do you think is the best thing about your home?
The neighborhood, I really do. Well, it's a sweet home. It really
Okay.
is a sweet home. It's really bright and airy, and
Easy for entertaining.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then the neighborhood is just like I said, so wonderful for children, young families.
Okay. All right, good. Well, I'm ready to go on a tour if you are. Do you have
Okay.
any questions for me at this point?
No, I don't.
Okay. Hi, Mike. Okay, so we're going to go on a tour, walk around the house. I'm going to take notes the entire time I'm with her because nothing says you're more interested in somebody than when you're taking notes. And you will find that in taking those notes, you're going to use them when you get back, and they will be very helpful. So as you walk around the house, you're already going to have a tax sheet. So you're going to know that it probably has 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a 2 or 3 car garage. Whatever is on that tax sheet is going to give you information about that house. But then it's nice to see what actually is there, the
What is
condition.
tax sheet? Is that something that you pulled off, okay.
Yeah.
I missed a little bit, so.
That's okay. Yes, the tax sheet, when you're preparing to go on a listing appointment, you're going to do a little bit of research before you go. Even though you're going to look at the house and gather information, you're going to do some preliminary research. There's a tax sheet that you can pull up in the MLS. You know, I think in what I gave them today, there is one this, because this is the information that you gave me on Stanford.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Actually, I got the information that property.
Oh, okay.
I had her text me what the reasons why she bought that property and all the amenities.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
Great.
I did my phone.
Okay. So the tax sheet, and you've got an enhanced report. Is this from that,
It's from Chicago Title.
from Chicago
I like
Title?
their reports a little bit better.
Okay,
I got rid of that last
okay. Okay, so you're going to have some information there that gives you, it's going to tell you the square footage of the property. It's going to tell you the year that it was built. It's going to tell you if there is a loan on the property. It won't tell you if it's paid off, but it will tell you, unless they've done a reconveyance, but it will tell you when the loan was taken out and give you some idea of the original loan value. It's going to possibly tell you who the builder is, and it's going to give you a history of that property for past sales, past owners, so on and so forth. If it happens to be a distressed property where the people perhaps are behind in their payments, are they still putting a little flag showing that there's an NOD on it?
Actually, someone had me look one up the other day.
Okay.
They're being foreclosed on to show them where the and all that.
Okay, all right. So if they've missed 3 payments or more, they're going to get a notice of default, and that's going to show up as a little flag right up at the top of that tax sheet. So you know, and that's something good to know before you go. We don't see a whole lot of those anymore, but we are still seeing some. And by the time we get on the other side of this pandemic, we may be seeing more of those kinds of properties coming up, depending on how this affects people. So we could have a changing market in some respects coming out of this that we haven't seen now for a few years. We've been building up out of the last one that we went through. So it's important to have that tax sheet and to read it before you go, so you know a little bit about the property. It's going to be easier for you to ask questions and find out more about the property just from having that information. Okay. So we're going to go through the house, and I'm not going to say anything about what she needs to do at this point, recommendations. I'm not doing my visual inspection, although I'm looking and I'm making notes, but I'm not going to discuss any of those things with my solar at this point because it's not the right time. Your reconnaissance mission is just that, you're gathering facts. Okay.
And they'll tell you if there's things like, oh, we just replaced our air conditioning and heater
Yes.
this last December.
Yeah.
So they may volunteer somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They probably will volunteer those kinds of things. And as you go from room to room, if you have a question about something that you see, you can certainly ask a question. But this isn't the time where you're going to discuss price or what they need to do. Now, if it comes up, and it may come up, if Gabriella said to me, what do you think this is worth? And she may ask that before I leave today, I'm going to tell her, that's my whole purpose. I want to go and do the very best research I can and come up with a range for you rather than work off the top of my head. Do you have a value in mind? What do you think it's worth?
I think it's worth $350.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We'll see how close
Okay,
that
wonderful.
comes
Yeah.
from our research. And we can do something like that, but I'm not going to say to her a given price range. Okay. Okay. So, do you have any questions for me at this point?
No, I'm just so excited. Oh, yes.
Okay.
When can we arrange for us to, if this is going to sell so quickly, we need to get on the ball with the person down south,
Yes.
the real estate agent down there.
When I come back tonight,
Okay.
I'll have a good person.
Oh.
So if I can get the city where you're going,
Mm-hmm.
if you know a specific neighborhood or zip code, I can take that. But if not, whoever we find for you
Okay.
will be an expert in that area.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'll personally interview whoever
Okay.
is
I
recommended.
can give you that information now. And I have a
Great.
zip in the city. And
Okay. Wonderful. That's good.
I say, no, you cannot move. I forbid it.
We shouldn't plant any seeds in our mind, should we?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
We're done?
It
Yeah.
is, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to look at the house, and I'm going to make my notes. We're going to go outside in the yard and look around too. And so that I have an idea of what's going on in the backyard. Okay. So then I'm going to go, and I gave you a CMA. I'm going to do some research. And when you go into the MLS, you're going to be able to search for properties in a number of ways when you're in the search. When you click on that search tab, you can search by address, by map, by radius. What I've done here is a radius search. I went out a little further, quite a bit further than I normally would, because I wanted to try to have as many properties. And I went out, I believe, a mile and only came up with this many. But the interesting thing here is that we have a lot of sales. The property behind here is a listing that Mitz has. Did this sell, Mitz, already?
It's going on Monday.
Oh, it's just going on Monday.
Well, it was supposed to go up 2 months ago, but we got the coronavirus.
Okay.
But I did close the transaction yesterday.
Oh, you did? Okay. Okay. So in the MLS, you're going to, when you're in that search, you can put in a number of parameters. If you put in too many, it may pull up 0 properties even if there's a lot. So you want to have the address there. Usually there's a category where you can go out 1/4 of a mile or 1/2 a mile or a mile, 2 miles or 5 or 10. And if you're in a regular neighborhood subdivision, about 1/4 of a mile, you want to stay as close as you can, but you want to have enough properties that are comparable. Mitch, you probably use a map search, don't you, rather than a radius?
I do agree.
Oh, you do? Okay,
It just depends on the price range.
okay.
So I think if Gabrielle is in Madera,
Mhm.
you're gonna be a little bit further away because it's
Properties.
on acres, right?
Yeah, 1.88.
Yeah,
You're allowed to go several miles.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
But if it's in like the heart of the city, it's anyone's mile.
yeah. Yes, if you have a property that's extremely unique, you might have to go all over the city to find a comp for it. But if you're in a typical neighborhood, there should be things within a short distance that are going to be comparable by age, square footage, perhaps builder, that kind of thing. And that's what you're looking for. That's the apples to apples kind of thing, where you're really comparing something that will be meaningful. So the square footage on the property that we're using here for our example had, I believe, 1,600 and, no, 1,837 or something like that. Okay, so when you look at this page, you'll notice that it's got the MLS listing number. It has the address, the city that it's in, the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, the square footage of the house, lot size, year. And I don't know what WA is. I've never known. Do you? WA on this, I never have known what the WA is. Okay. So we're both stumped. That's not something we use very often, apparently.
I think it's fireplace with pool.
Okay. Okay. The date,
So that means fireplace, WA?
well, I'm not sure that it does. Mitch thinks that may be what it is. We'll find out and I'll give you an update next time. We'll call the board and find out. The date, the dollar per square foot costs of that property. And then you're going to see DOM/CDOM, and that is days on the market and combined days on the market. And the reason that we've got both of those is because it used to be that agents would have a listing and maybe it would expire and somebody else would have it, and they kept popping up as new listings, or an agent would let it expire just so he could put it in as a new listing. Maybe it had been on the market for a while and it wasn't a true picture for a buyer as to how long it had been on the market, because a buyer wants to know those things. If it's been on the market for a while, is there something wrong with it? Is the seller asking too much? Why is it like that? Okay, so with the days on the market now, a property has to be off the market for 61 or 62 days in our MLS before it can come back as a new listing, which means that a buyer gets a truer picture for how long it actually has been on the market. That's what that's all about. So days on the market, the original listing price and the current listing price. And then if you look at the solds, it's got the sale price and then the sale price percentage to listing value. Out of all of those numbers, what do you think, for our purposes right now, is the least important? No, I think it's the price per square foot. Yeah, because until you know what you're actually comparing,
Right.
that will become an important figure later on, and it's used a lot in the industry. But if that's the only figure that you're using and you're setting the value of a house by that, I think that that possibly could be a disservice for the seller. So you have to go further than that. Okay, if you look at the solds down below, we have quite a few to look at there. They're all within range of the square footage of Mitsa's listing. And they're all about the same vintage in the 70s. There's one 93 and 94 and one that was built in 1980, but the others are in the late 70s. So about the same vintage. It shows the date that that should be the date that it's sold, but I'm not sure that it is. So anyway, then the price and then the days on the market. If you look at the original listing price, the listing price at the time that it sold, and the actual selling price, and look at the percentage of the listing price that it sold at, usually you can see something pretty interesting. And let's take a look here to see. If you look at the number of days it was on the market, yeah, usually the fewer days that it is on the market, the higher the percentage of selling price to listing price you'll see. The longer it's on the market, the less that percentage is going to be. Because when something sits on the market for a long time, it gets a little stale, yeah. And people will usually come in and make offers. And it can be perhaps, especially if they've reduced the price, that they started out too high to begin with. I think there's a whole lot of information in that very last column and the days that it's on the market that you can use to guide your seller into an appropriate listing price just by pointing those things out. We don't have a wide variance on this. These were all listed pretty well. Some sold for under 100%, and the least one's at about 98. So that's a pretty good range. And they all sold fairly quickly, 58 days in today's market. Let's see when that, if that closed in December. Okay. So if our listing is 1,800 and I think 64, 67 square feet. And the lot size on that, I think, was a little over 8,000 square feet. So fairly comparable lot sizes. One of them is down around 6,300. Number of bedrooms, Let's jump in on this discussion or any part of this, but I'm gonna say if your square footage is about the same, it probably won't matter a whole lot whether it's a 3 or 4 bedroom if the square footage is the same. Do you have an opinion?
Well, it depends on the neighborhood. If the neighborhood is a neighborhood where everybody has 4 bedrooms, then having 3 bedrooms is a negative. But if it, nowadays everybody wants 4 bedrooms. So in a more modern neighborhood, maybe the bedroom probably would have 3 bedrooms. But the appraiser is only going to mark out not very much, maybe 5,000 or 6,000 at most when they're going through the
Yeah.
checklist. A really good way to gauge how to assess a property when you're in very particular neighborhoods, like where everything's very similar to go through an appraisal. Like when people talk about dollars per square feet, that's only one line out of 20 things that make a
Yes.
difference in the value of the property.
Yeah.
So like when an appraiser, here's a realtor, and they say quite often when you tell them $1 per square feet, they look at you like, what are you telling me? You're going to base your property sold $1 per square feet?
Yeah.
There's a million things that I looked at before I come in with the last
Yes.
prices. So, that's kind of a bit detriment if you mention that to an appraiser, although we use it all the time in real estate. That's how we converse with each other. But don't keep it to yourself and talk to the feeling in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, it just depends on the neighborhood. Like in the country, in Madera, all these properties, those are mostly all 3 bedrooms. Right? So that's fine.
Yes.
So if you have a 4 bedroom, it's probably plus 5.
Right.
Sometimes some builders, if they're selling houses during the construction phase or before, they will have a floor plan that you can either have 4 bedrooms or you can take the space that would be that 4th bedroom and utilize it as an office or maybe increase the size of the master bedroom or something like that. I've seen those kinds of things too. But the square footage stays about the same. So it just depends on a variety of things. What this doesn't tell us is what the inside of those houses are like. Doesn't say anything about condition, about whether it's been updated, so on and so forth. So what you want to do after you run this is a snapshot. I think that this is just something that gives you a picture of what's going on in this area. And generally speaking, this is what's going on. But then you would pick out the houses that you feel might be the closest to your subject property, and you would pull up the listing sheet on those and compare the agent remarks and the listing remarks to what you know about the house that you are trying to list. Okay. If it says something like needs TLC, what do you think that means? Probably not updated. TLC could be a whole lot more than a coat of paint or something.
Yeah. It's a new roof and
Yeah. As a listing agent, if I could tell you to do one thing that I think is really important, it would be when you're doing your marketing remarks, be descriptive and talk about it. If you go through the MLS and you see listings where sometimes the agents don't put any remarks, that's a huge disservice to the seller. And it doesn't help later on because appraisers look at that information and other agents look at that other information to know how to price something when they're working on a listing. So you want to hope that the properties that you choose to compare yours to will have good information, like this house has been totally updated 3 years ago with new cupboards, new granite, new flooring, paint on the inside. whatever it was, the more information you can put about the condition of that house, personally, I think the better. If it hasn't been updated and it's run down, there's ways to say things without condemning the house. Okay, and you can say, house has never been updated, original condition, shows wear and tear. If it is a house that's been empty and been vandalized, you might want to say something like that, or not. It just depends.
Is, I think usually when we talk about it, just to be fair, you need to follow someone else, people that, it's price accordingly.
Yeah.
You can buy it to somebody who has the right kind of ability.
Yeah.
And, if you know, it's one plan, it's a popular one, like one of the law, and things like that.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's always money or time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If you got a lot of money, you can put it on the market for a high price, but I mean, if you need to get this thing so quick, you have to price it for it.
Yeah. Very true. So when you pull up those properties that you're going to compare to and use for your comparable properties, you want to look at those agent remarks. You want to look at how long it was on the market. If it's still on the market, that's the competition for your property. And you want to know what that competition is like too. Okay. So that's what you're going to look at. And I think it doesn't take very long to develop a, for lack of a better term, a gut feeling about a property's value. I think you learn that quickly. And the best way is just to be in some. What's that, Mitch?
I look at the photographs first,
Yes.
because you know how flowery some real estate is.
Yeah.
So the photographs will tell you if it's been upgraded, what kind of amenities they have on it.
Yeah.
And then they'll further the information by the comments, because they'll tell you if it's a name brand or all
Yeah.
that. So you can't really see that. I mean, unless
Yeah.
you're really good at shopping, which you guys may.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. Sometimes you see a listing that has one picture of the outside and it's a big tree in front of it. So you get a picture of a tree. It doesn't tell you anything about the house either. So our company has a policy. We have to have a minimum of 6 photographs of a listing. But even that's pretty minimal, because unless a house is just really in bad shape or something, and you don't want to take a lot of pictures, the pictures will sell the property, or it's going to help sell the property. So you want a lot of pictures. But the good news is most agents will use a professional photographer now. And we do recommend that because they know how to get the best angles, the best light. You're not going to go around and take pictures with toilet seats up and dirty dishes in the sink and that kind of thing. It's another discussion you want to have with your seller when that photographer is going to be there. And if you're going to be the photographer, you want to have things done right too. If you're the photographer, you can kind of go around and move all of the dirty dishes to one side and get a nice shot or something. I don't know. Does Juan Carlos do that? Does he move
I
things?
go with Juan Carlos. So I'll grab all the stuff that doesn't belong in the photo shoot. We'll leave it in another room and then I'll put them all back.
Yeah.
And then, we'll try to capture the light behind the atmosphere.
Yes.
And he's excellent. So having an extra hand is because it will get done with us.
Like those personal photographs and stuff like that.
I usually tell people to take those things down,
Okay.
or at least part of them. If they've got like a wall full of photography, then they might want to fix that. I actually have to do that for a friend of mine. We have way too many things on the wall.
Yeah.
One of the things Marsha's telling me about is about an amount of photographs and quality photographs. They used to say you had 12 seconds to captivate the attention of the month thing, and if they do their initial search, now it's only 6. So it's also good. The amount of photographs you have in the order in which they come. Everybody, we go to the MLS. Everybody goes front, side, entryway, living room, like that. They actually recommend that you take a front shot of the house, and after that, whatever amenity is the most captivating in the property. So if it has an excellent backyard, that should be your second photograph. And if they like that, they'll usually make it past, to the end of the photos. So whatever it is, whatever the key is that you think is important to the property, the seller thinks is important to the property, do a second photograph in your slides. And the other thing is you have to have a lot of photographs and you have to have a video, because those things raise your search engine optimization. You'll hear that being mentioned all the time, SEO, and it's how your property comes up on Google. That's exactly what it means, SEO. So when someone searches something for a property in your area, like in there, the more photos, the more video and everything that you have, the sooner it will come up in that Google search. One of the secrets to getting people on there. The more they click on it, the higher your SEO goes also. So if they make it all the way through your photographs, you have a higher likelihood of getting it.
So photography really is important, and it will sell a house much quicker than having too few pictures or poor photography, that kind of thing. So it's important to talk to your people about that and prepare them and have them ready, have the house ready for the photography, because that kind of marketing is just so important, because so many things are, well, everything is on the internet now, but even in just the MLS, people look at those kinds of things. So, okay, so you're going to try to find the properties that compare to yours, and then come up with a range of prices for this listing. The range doesn't have to be a great big range. In fact, it should probably be pretty narrow. But remember, when you're talking to your seller and you're finding out what's most important to them, the price you get, the time it takes, or the convenience of not having to market this property yourself. If somebody says, price is most important to me, if we don't sell it at this price, then we can't sell. We have to get this amount of money. Probably that's going to be at the highest range, probably. And that usually is going to take longer than something that is priced really well. If somebody says, we have to be in LA within 30 days, we don't have a lot of time, we've already purchased something down there, we're on a tight schedule, we need to get this sold, then they need to be at the bottom of that range to attract more people right away. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what you're going to say to your seller and how you're going to present this information to your seller. I think it's really important to let a seller know that the initial impact and the first days on the market are the most important, because we have, especially in this market where we have too few properties and more buyers, we have people waiting. Maybe they've already made an offer on 1 or 2 or 3 other properties and they've lost. They're anxious, they're waiting, and they're watching. Those people are online all day and watching what comes up. And as soon as the one comes up that fits their needs, you're going to be on top of it. Those are probably some of your best buyers, because they're ready. They know the market. They know what they have to do to be competitive. And you usually will get your best offers right away. Not always. I mean, nothing's an absolute. But I think if you prepare your seller that there are people out there waiting, and your best offers are going to come sooner. A lot of times sellers will say, we can always come down. We want to start high, because they've got a because, And usually what they're basing their because on is some emotional value that they have to the property. We've done so much. We've added this, we've added that. You're going to factor all of those kinds of things into what your range is. But if they miss that first week or 2 weeks of that property being on the market and it's listed too high, it probably will sit there. And even if it doesn't sit there too long, they probably will get a lower offer than they would if it's priced right and somebody comes in and they will offer the asking price and sometimes higher. In today's market, that's pretty common. So you have to let a seller know there's people out there waiting, but they know the market, and if you're priced right, then we should expect to get an offer pretty quickly.
You're talking about like a really high offer, like they're wanting to list it really high, or just a higher end of the market?
If they're at the high end of the range that you give them, then you've got some room to work there. And on an average house, it's a range of maybe 5,000 to 7,000. Is that about what a range would be, do you think?
This neighborhood is probably about 40,000.
40,000?
From 300, well, within a 20% GOA.
Uh-huh.
Between 300 and 340, 344, that's what's up there.
Okay.
So, I mean, just a really improved house. That these two houses, the one that's on the top here and the one that's on the bottom,
Uh-huh.
they're actually model matches. They're exactly the same square foot and floor plan. So one's at 322 and the other's at 344. The 344 is a little more fixed up, and the 322 is probably similar to our property, but I think we have a little bit cleaner floor plan. So we actually priced it a little in between.
Did you?
Because they could try to get to 344, but these guys want to move fast because they already bought another property.
Yeah.
So being right in the middle is comfortable for them, and it shows that they are motivated. And I told them, if that's what you want to move fast, then we have to slide it down. And being right in the middle is comfortable for them.
Okay. All right. Gosh, I had no idea you could have a range of 40,000 different and
Well, that neighborhood, they have very stock properties that have no improvements to.
Wow.
Have 30 or 40, 50,000 very easily.
yeah.
But it's just a wide swing, that's all.
Yeah. Okay.
But, I mean, you basically use your power of comparison to be able to determine where you belong in that. And that's
Yeah.
what photographs come in very handy. You're literally comparing the same floor plan to each other in those two cases. So that's what makes this one easy. It's when you've got very unlike properties that are in the neighborhood or custom houses.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So you're going to go back and be ready to present the information that you found, the range that you have, and knowing where your motivation is, selling price or quick sale is going to help you put it in that range or give them the information they need to choose where they want to put it.
What if they say, I want it sold fast, but at the highest price? You have to break it to them that just may not happen.
Yeah, the higher that they place it, the longer it's going to take,
Right.
generally speaking.
Yeah.
Can't have both.
Right.
Can't have both usually. If they place it toward the lower end of that range, it stands to reason that they're going to get more showings and more offers, and there's a good chance that it's going to actually raise the selling price because they're competing for that property. So that happens too. And a lot of times sellers, agents will say, we've got 3 offers here. They're all pretty comparable. Let's send out a counter offer to all of them and tell them to give us their highest and best offer. We see that quite a bit. So it depends. Sometimes people will say, we're not going to raise our price. We came in at what we thought was the best price. Sometimes they may be getting advice from their agent who says, you know, if you go much higher than this, you may have an appraisal problem. And if you have an appraisal problem, then you have to figure out what's going to happen with that situation. So just depends.
You have that quite a bit where there's an appraisal problem because the buyer or the seller wants to go a little too high.
Well, Mitch, you can jump in here, but I think it's kind of an interesting time for appraisals because of this virus thing.
Yeah, it's, what we're doing on the screen is actually more like what appraisals are doing now, because they're trying not to enter the property. And that's basically what I used to do. I used to do broker price opinion. So they're basically drive-by opinions based on comparison and everything. I know it's a kind of tough situation because there's not a lot. Some of the properties have really horrible properties. You know, guys with their cell phone while they're running through the property.
Ah, my word.
But like in this particular case, you're not going to see too many people challenging the values of properties because the banks are being very conservative. So if you see somebody pushing up the price on an excellent property, maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000, that's probably reasonable because of the lack of demand, the lack of supply. But you're not going to see anybody going to 20 or 30,000. Although Russ had a property like that he thought was superior to anything in the market for like 30,000. I thought that was a little far-fetched. So I actually took him to see if he would text me back. He hasn't texted me back yet, so I don't feel like he didn't come through. But yeah, I mean, you got to kind of have an idea what the pulse of the market is doing right now. It is different right now. Last month, I think everything under 400,000 was 135 properties pending. Now, this month alone, it's over 235. You know, it's almost double. And then things over 400,000, before that, 63 sales or 30 sales. Now there's over 130. So things are changing and things are moving. But appraisal, it always lags behind. You know, it has to react with the sales that catch up. So things are going to be changing in the next couple months. We're like at a teetering.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to fit. So that's like what Marsha was saying, kind of doing a wide scale of variety. If they want to test a higher price, you just gotta let them know more time because of the fact that it's going to be over what is like some of the appraisal jargon that's really important. Is like you want to tell them that you're pricing this property bracketed between a low and a high confidence, very similar to it. And like in our case, this one right here, where there's 2 properties exactly the same floor plan, those are called model matches. So when the appraiser sees those and appears to use those terms, he understands that, yeah, these are the most like this property, and these are the ones he's probably using for, within the case like on an FHA deal, the appraiser will only use the distance away from the subject property until they find 3 active and 3 sold properties. You may have a perfect model match that's exactly like your property that's superior in price, but they won't use it. So if it's a conventional property where they have a lot of money down, they can have a little more latitude in their full property. So you kind of got to know what kind of buyer lies in the neighborhood. If it's a really rough neighborhood but a very nice property, it's probably still going to go up. So you got to kind of know how far away you can go to the right price. Or lower price properties are most likely.
Have you talked to Suzanne lately? I talked to
Suzanne about price.
I talked to her last night. She had people that had made an offer. I think she said about 20,000 over what the asking price was, and she told them this isn't going to appraise. Well, the appraisal came in, this is hard to believe, but around 60,000 more than what the,
Was it a really high price property?
I want to say it was two something.
Oh, wow, that's weird.
Yeah, but she was afraid the seller's going to find out and not want to sell it now. That sounds like Suzanne.
She wasn't the listing agent, though.
No,
That's-
yeah,
that's-
yeah, it was unusual. So to answer your question, appraisals are kind of coming in all over right now, because you hear one person say it came in low and another person said it came in very high. And so all you can do is just do your best with the facts that you have in pricing, and then just see what happens.
You can't go wrong that way, right?
Can't go wrong
Yeah,
if you, if you use good information and, yeah, that's all you can do is go by the facts.
Just to let
And-
you guys know too, that situation that you're talking about doesn't happen very often, because even if they thought the property was worth more to the buyer, they're only going to likely pay the whatever they're asking. They've been doing that for a long time, because they want to dismiss any kind of situation like what we're talking about, where the sellers make, oh, okay, is that how much the property is? So most of the time, I'd say about 99% of the time, they're coming at sale price and not at some number that we have.
Yeah.
I had the same thing happen with one of my friends' houses. Like, I knew that it was worth a little bit more, but they said, yeah, you're right, it is worth more, but this is what we're put on there because we have.
Yeah.
So it's all right. You might be right on a higher price, but they're still going to give you whatever the same.
Yeah. Years ago, that's what they appraised were, was just loan value. And as long as it appraised at loan value and to protect a lender, and then they got away from that. But who knows?
There's a lot of properties you don't have appraisals. This last one I closed, we had $300,000 down on a $400,000 property. Sure, no appraisal. I think that's a lot more common.
Oh, because of the virus.
Making, well, yeah, that and generational moves where people are selling multiple houses, they a lot of them, yeah.
Mhm. One thing I think you can gather from this conversation is that everything evolves all the time. Nothing stays the same. So about the time you think you know one thing about this industry, it evolves and it's changed. So that's one reason that it's important to keep up with everything that happens and continually educate yourself, because it is a process. Okay. Okay, so when you go back and you're sitting with your seller and you're presenting this information, you're going to ask them how they feel about this and what they would like to do, and guide them through the process about the time frame that they have, so on and so forth, and come up with a price that is going to make that seller happy, hopefully. Okay. So when I go back to your house tonight,
Let me
And-
look there again.
sure, meet with you and your husband. Okay, I've done my research and I would like to show you a little bit. And we're going to go over this, and I'm going to point out some things, and I'm going to work probably in this column a lot, and the closing date and the price, and point out these prices, and then make a recommendation. My recommendation is that your property probably, if we put it on the market at $350, will probably sell in the neighborhood of maybe $350 to $355,
Okay,
something like that, in that general. But I think $350 would be a good, comfortable place where it should sell quickly.
okay,
And that sound good to you?
yes,
Good.
yeah.
Okay. All right. I brought paperwork with me tonight. Are you ready to do some paperwork?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me?
So would you explain that to him? So what is that? Yeah.
Okay. Yes. These are the sold properties.
Oh.
An appraiser is going to look at past sales when they come up with a value on an appraisal for your property.
Oh, okay.
Well, if somebody makes an offer on your house and is getting a loan, most usually will have an appraisal. I know that what Mitch said is true. They're beginning to have fewer appraisals. It used to be every property had an appraisal if it had a loan. So it's up to the
So-
lender.
If we don't have a loan, outstanding loan, then we may not have an appraisal.
If somebody comes along and pays cash,
Okay.
they may choose not to have an appraisal, but they may choose to have one too. It's their option. They don't
Okay.
have to have one.
Got it.
Some people don't want to spend the money. They feel like they know the pricing of houses in this area, or they trust that their agent has done a good job for them.
Would
So-
I pay for the appraisal or would it?
No, that's a good question. Buyers pay for the appraisal,
Okay.
and that's not something that you should have to worry about. Sometimes a seller will pay for an appraisal if they want some reassurance for what's happening in the market.
Okay.
Okay, but that doesn't happen very often.
Okay. I'm happy with that price, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think these sales that are within a short distance of your house are all pretty realistic and shows us where we should be. Okay, good. So then we're going to talk about marketing. We're going to talk about how soon we need to get it on the market. We're going to talk about anything that I've seen to recommend. Okay, and you need to be honest. You need to be forthright. You need to be tactful. If somebody has a disaster of a house because of their housekeeping, you need to let them know your house may be worth X number of dollars, but when people come into a house that isn't pristine, you're going to see little negatives, and all of those negatives equate to value coming down. The more positives you can have when somebody walks in, the more that they're going to appreciate what you've got and what you've done and that price, and you're going to get offers accordingly. So if we need to take a little time before we put it on the market and just have it in the very best condition for showing, so that windows are clean and sparkly. If drapes need to be cleaned, or maybe drapes need to come down, whatever, and give somebody your idea. If they want to know about staging, I would say our little book here has some good ideas on staging, but if they think that they need to have a professional, some of those professionals are very expensive. They can be $800 to $1,000 or more for staging the house. So you have to really consider.
And how long is that staging, that $800? Would that be for the whole listing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Now that staging may be advice. It may be bringing in, if you've got a vacant house, maybe they're going to bring in some of their furniture or do things like that. But if it's an occupied house, a lot of times it's advice on it may be on trends for what people like to see or need to see, want to see, like colors. Do you need to repaint a room or something? Do you need to take out some things? Do you need to bring in some things? That sort of thing. They may make recommendations on taking pieces of furniture out. Mitz mentioned clutter a while ago. If people have an excess of treasures, because a lot of people collect treasures, then let them know you're going to be moving anyway. The whole idea is to show space. And if you could pack up some of these things, get all of your seasonal clothes out of the closet, your house is going to sell, if it's summer, your house is going to sell before winter. You're not going to need those winter things. So pack them up. If you need to rent a storage unit or something during our listing period, it's going to equate to more dollars for you. Number one, if the house sells faster, because it's the time value of money. And if there's just greater appeal, it's going to sell faster too. So advise them on some of those things. I think the place where you have to be very careful is about religion, because we have a lot of different religions in this area. And I've heard of people that have told people, you've got to pack up your religious stuff because. And I don't think we can tell anybody that. You can recommend that if they have a lot of photographs and that kind of thing. The whole idea is to get people to walk into a house and project themselves into the house. If they get caught up in your decor and your treasures and your photography, your family members, that may boost a seller's ego, but it doesn't help sell the house. So you have to talk to them about those things, but be very careful about religion. Just like with pets. I think I mentioned the other day there was a local agent that used to tell people if they had pets, they had to get rid of them. They couldn't have them on the property. If they have a vicious animal and it has to be held in place by a huge chain, you don't want to subject people to an animal that could harm them, because those are lawsuits beside injury. But to tell somebody they have to get rid of a family pet, I think is really disheartening.
Harsh.
Harsh, very harsh, yes. Okay. And then I would talk to Gabriella about what to do for showings. When somebody comes and makes an appointment, the very best thing is for you to be away from home. Let people walk in, project themselves. They're always going to be with an agent. That agent is going to help them through the property. If by chance you have to be here because of some reason and can't leave, then my advice would be to invite them in, tell the agent, you go ahead and look around, take your clients any place that you need to, and I'll be here in the kitchen when you get finished, if you have any questions. So you don't want to follow people around. You certainly don't want to be the tour leader, because that's going to be a negative influence in that whole process.
Okay. What if someone knocks on the door? Should I let them in?
No, absolutely not. One of the reasons that people hire agents these days is for security, because if people knock on the door, you don't know what their motive is. And it could be a whole lot different than selling or buying your house.
All about cameras, right?
Yes, good point.
A lot of smartphones.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people will have microphones and cameras. If you're going to have that in your house, and a lot of people do these days, you need to post a notice someplace that says you are being monitored or videoed, and let people know. And my recommendation, if you're showing a house, I always, even years ago, just assumed that there was going to be a camera or a recorder someplace, so that you just don't say things or do things in a house that you wouldn't do if the owners were standing there. So, and sometimes you'll get buyers that make comments and that kind of thing too. And that might be a part of your counseling buyers when you're showing property. If they've got children, they either carry them or hold their hand. And if they have comments, let's just hold our comments until we're outside and in private, because you never know. If you have dogs, Gabriella, do you have pets?
I only have a cat.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
Does
my husband's fanatical about cleaning the kitty litter.
okay,
Yes. 2 or 3 times a day.
that's
There's
good.
no smell.
Okay. Is it an indoor kitty?
It
must be.
is, yeah, but
Okay.
it hides. It's a hider, so.
Oh, okay. All right. And sometimes that's an important thing to let people know. There is a cat in the house. Please make sure he doesn't get out. If they go out in the backyard, don't leave that door open, because that's about the time a kitty will sneak out. So,
You gotta make sure you let the realtors know where the kid is at, because sometimes people close the door on the cat, and then can't go anywhere, and that
Yes.
actually happened to somebody before.
yeah, yeah.
Kitty was mad.
Yeah, put a sign on the door, please leave this door open, because a lot of times the kitty litter thing is in the laundry room, right?
Uh-huh.
And then people are, realtors are careful, they close the door before they leave. Well, cats out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Here's another question to ask your seller. Gabriella, is there anything that you plan to take and not leave that should be here?
Probably the chandelier over the dining room table.
Okay.
I'd like to take that. But other
Okay.
than that, we're good to go.
Okay, my recommendation is before we put it on the market and have our first showing, if you could find the replacement that you're going to replace it with and change that fixture, because people need to see what they're going to be living with and what they're going to buy. This is the absolute truth. And almost every agent can tell you the same story. You have something that doesn't go with the property, and the seller's going to take it, it becomes a matter of principle. And even if an agent offers or agrees or wants to replace that item, nope, I've lost trust in that seller, don't want to deal with that seller, and it's over a $200 light fixture. And especially if it's a very expensive light fixture. I have the same thing. I have a chandelier that's been in every house I've lived in as an adult. But I take it down before I put a house on the market and nobody sees it. And then nobody can want it. Yeah.
Should I buy one that's similar?
You buy whatever you think would look good there at
Okay.
whatever price you think fits your house.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. If you have any shrubs, plants, fountains, things like that in the backyard that you plan to take, then those things need to be removed too.
Okay. I do have a freestanding fountain, so.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. All right. Yeah. A lot of times you'll walk in a house and you'll see little notes tacked everywhere, not staying, not saying, not saying. And that can be very disconcerting. It can be very off-putting also. Yeah. For a buyer to walk in and say, well, what's going to be left here? So anything that you do want to do, if we need to take a couple of extra days before we actually have the starting date of the listing, let's do that and get those things put away so that they don't become issues.
So, would you recommend a handyman to do that, or, right now I haven't used one for a while.
Okay, it depends on how handy you are with doing those kinds of things. If your husband can do those kind of things, then certainly
Okay.
go ahead and take care of it yourself. Lowe's, Home Depot, there's a few lighting stores around, all have things that look very good. So, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Otherwise, I think your house looks really good. I think it's charming. I think that we're going to get some good responses, and we'll be ready to go. Do you think you want an extra day or two
Oh, to get it ready?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I'd like to
Okay.
do the deep cleaning before we
Okay,
show it first.
okay. Do you think if you had a week, or do you need a little more time than a week to get everything done?
No, it's good.
Okay, so if today is, what, the 14th, if we put it on, if we put it on a week from tomorrow on Friday, that will give us the weekend
Okay.
and usually some good showings. That be okay?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, good.
And we're usually free in the mornings. My husband likes to come back in the afternoons. but,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, good. I'm going to arrange for a photographer to come.
Okay.
And when we get an offer, we're going to have to provide to a buyer a natural hazard disclosure report.
Okay.
I would like to go ahead and order that report.
Okay.
You might think about whether you want to have a pest inspection. A lot of times, if you get that pest inspection done ahead of time, then that helps you know how to negotiate if there's some work that needs to be done. And you never know with the pest report because we can't see in the walls and that
Okay.
kind of
I'm
thing.
fine
So
with that.
do you have somebody, or would you like me
Yeah,
to?
Yeah, we can
You-
go. Yeah.
Okay, you've got somebody? Okay.
Would
Just take a
you,
look.
at that time of this conversation, would you give her that form that she has to fill out, that disclosure form, or I don't remember what it was called?
Yes, and we haven't talked about that yet, but before I go, I'm going to introduce those forms and say there are some things that we have to do, and this is just about the point where we are. There's some things that we have to have ready for a buyer. We have some disclosures that you have to fill out, and it's just regarding the property. The whole purpose of this form is to jog your memory so that you can give as much information to a buyer as possible. We've got a transfer disclosure statement and another one called a solar property questionnaire. A couple of other forms. I'm going to leave those with you so that you can look at them at your leisure, and then I'll come back in a day or two and pick them up. And when I come back, my job, part of my job is required by the state of California, is to do what is called a competent agent visual inspection. I have to go around and see if I see any red flags, things to note on a form that I have to fill out then. And I will do that at that time, if that's okay, when I
Oh,
come back to
sure.
get yours.
Should I fix those things or
Which things are those?
your visual inspection? If
Oh.
you find something.
Well, you know, when at the time, we'll talk about that. Having been through your house now, I don't see anything that jumps out at me as a red flag.
Okay.
And those are the kind of things that we're supposed to know. If I saw a stain on the ceiling, I would note that.
Mhm.
Some agents might tell you to paint it or get rid of it or something like that. I wouldn't tell you to do that, but I would note it. And then that would be something for their home inspector, that buyer's home inspector, to look at the time that they get a home inspection and determine whether it's something old that's been taken care of or is current and needs to be addressed. Okay. The same with the pest inspection. When you call your pest inspector and we get a report, we'll know if there's something that really should be taken care of ahead of time, or whether it can just.
When I had my
Leave it alone.
heater and air conditioner put in, I had them inspect the roof, and so I had a roofer come out to inspect
good.
that. and,
Okay.
we
Did
just-
he give you a report?
He didn't, but I'm sure I could request it. I did have the, you know, where the peaks meet.
Uh-huh.
That was just redone. He just said that was the only thing that
Oh,
needed
okay.
to be done.
All right, good. Was that fairly recently?
Oh, yeah, it was in January.
Oh, okay. All right, good. That would be good information to pass on. The more information in a positive light that we can pass on, the more appealing it's going to be to a buyer. So that's why I think it's a good thing to get a pest report and have that in HD. We can provide that right away.
The pet report is included in the buyer doing that?
Well, it depends. It's negotiable as to who does the pest report. Usually, they're going to ask the seller to do the report, and then any work is negotiable as to who does it or who pays for it. And sometimes there's different philosophies on this. Some people don't want to put anything on a purchase agreement about getting a report because then it has to go to the lender. So there's different feelings about that. My personal feeling is that to me, everything should be on top of the table and all discussed and out in the open. But even some lenders don't want that information
That's right,
on
she
a, yeah.
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 That's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
But they don't. Why is that? Why do they want it?
Because then it creates a situation where that work has to be done in order to get the loan.
Oh, I see.
Red flag.
What I feel gets lost in all of that, our job is to protect the consumer, the home buyer. And if they buy a house that needs pest work, but nobody wants to talk about it because then there's an expense and time and subject to lender approval and that kind of thing. They don't want to deal with that, but then you've got a consumer that may be compromised. That's my personal worry.
Okay, so let's say it is now that you ask me if she want to have a pet control, do ahead of time, and then now the pet control come out say, oh well, we need to fix this and that. Is that's when we report to lender or
No, that's something that you are, if she has a pest control operator come out and do an inspection, then we are required to pass that report on to a buyer. Doesn't mean that she has to fix anything at all. She just has to pass the report on to a buyer.
But if it's minimal, then I could fix it, and then that's a positive light, right?
You could, or you could wait and see what yes, you could, if it's minimal, you might want to do it before you put the property on the market, then you can give them a certification that it's all done. That equates to something that's positive too. If there's a lot of work, then that makes things negotiable as to who's going to pay for it. And there again, it's strategy in a market and knowing what the market is like. In a market that we have today, where we have more buyers than properties, buyers are more apt to take a property that isn't totally done,
Okay.
because somebody else will, because there aren't enough properties to go around. But if you're in a market where you've got a lot of properties and fewer buyers, that seller is much more apt to do anything to attract a buyer because they're fewer and far between. So the market that we're in right now, we have more buyers than properties generally.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. It's a lot easier. It's not fun to be in a market where properties sit for a long time and you've got a listing for 6 or 8 months or 9 months or a year and there's just nothing moving. So we haven't had a market like that for a long time, but sooner or later they come back around. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the process. We've talked about showing and what happens. Don't want to let anybody in if they don't have an agent with them. Once we get an offer, you've got 3 choices. You can accept it the way it's written. You can totally reject it. Or if there are some things that you like and some that you don't, we can counter for the things that don't work for you, give a counter offer to that buyer. And counter offers can go back and forth between buyers and sellers until somebody accepts it or it's totally rejected. Usually, if there's a counter, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to go together. A little bit of compromise on both sides.
What if there's more than one offer?
Okay, if there's more than one offer, and there's a real good chance there will be, we're going to look at all of those offers. I'm going to tell you the way I like to work. Different agents have different philosophies, and sometimes sellers do too. So your input is important. If we get one offer, my job is to get that offer to you and let you make a decision about it. If we get more than one offer that come in at the same time, then we're going to look at all of those, and you can pick and choose what works for you. If none of them are ideal for you, we can counter all of them. If one of them just won't work at all and you don't see any hope for it working, but a couple of them look good, we can counter the ones that you want to counter and give people an opportunity to accept that counter.
Can I have a contingency?
You can for buying something in another location.
You know, if I like, what if it falls through at the 11th hour?
Okay, what would your contingency be?
Well, if I got a second offer that was really good too,
Oh,
maybe a couple thousand less,
okay.
could I do that?
Well, what you're talking about, and I think it's a real good idea, is having a backup offer.
Oh, okay.
So yes, let's say you've got 2 or 3 offers here.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is just ideal, is perfect. You want to go with that one. The others aren't bad. We can accept this one. We can take those 2 and we can put them in a backup position, and we can negotiate the terms on counter offers with the understanding that they're backup offers. In order to be a legitimate backup offer, it has to be a contract that has been negotiated between buyer and seller, acceptable. It's been signed. There's just a stipulation that this offer is in backup position. We've got 2 offers. We'd have first backup and second backup, and subject to cancellation of the first offer.
Okay.
It's never bad to have a counter offer because you never know at what point an offer will fall apart.
And then how long should I tell those people to?
To hang in there
Yes.
until they decide they don't want to, or until your offer closes. Because here's what can happen when you accept an offer. If people decide to cancel right away, it's because a lot of times they go home and sleep on it and wake up the next morning and think, oh my gosh, what have I done? And it's just buyer's remorse. So sometimes we'll lose an offer right away like that. Sometimes it's when during the loan process or the escrow process, the lender finds something and it knocks that buyer out of being able to buy. The other time is when it goes through underwriting, and the underwriter or the lender will see something either on the property or the buyer that they have some conditions that have to be met. So anywhere along the way, something can happen.
Like childcare or something. They haven't paid their.
Right, they haven't paid their child support. That's a frequent thing. The other common thing, and we caution buyers very, very much on this, don't do anything that's going to change your credit report score, because that can throw you out very quickly if you're trying to get a loan. So we tell people not to buy cars, don't go out and buy furniture, don't pay off something, work with your lender and let your lender tell you what you can and can't do.
So if I decide to have it staged, and I pay that $800, should that be like in cash or something? So it,
Well, you can spend money out of your checking account.
okay, good. All right, thank you.
Just don't put it on your charge card.
Oh, okay.
If you give that stager $800. Good questions, though. Okay. Okay. Okay, the other thing that we should probably talk about with your seller is the close of escrow. When we get an offer, it's going to have a closing date or so many days from acceptance once they get their loan ready. There's some optional things that can happen and some other things that you don't want to be optional that can happen. But let's say everything is happening very quickly and that loan officer gets the loan processed and they're ready to close early. If there's any way to do that, they can only do that with your permission. So that's something to keep in mind. It doesn't happen too often that we can close early, but every once in a while, keep that in mind. That's a possibility. The other thing is that no matter what the date or the time is on the offer for closing, you never know what's going to happen during the course of an escrow, and especially through the loan process, because underwriting will make a condition or either on the property or that buyer, maybe they have to pay something off or whatever. And so your closing date of June 15th suddenly becomes June 20th or July 1st. We have to be a little bit flexible in that respect too, because until it closes, it isn't closed, which is a funny way of saying it, but until you've got your proceeds check in your hand, then you know it's really closed. Everybody's working up to that point, but there are delays and things that happen. I think the hardest part of an escrow is a seller that's waiting to go because you've got things you want to do and places you want to be. You need that check in your hand. You've scheduled your mover, and then all of a sudden there's a delay. It makes a hardship on everybody, but it's something we just have to work through.
What if they want to move in?
Well, we're not going to let them move in.
Okay.
The delay usually comes from what, the bank or something, the lender?
Usually it's the lender, and it's something that's happened during that process that is a requirement. Maybe the underwriter sees the pest report, let's say, and they've had a section 1 clearance, but maybe that underwriter sees something on section 2 and they say, we'd just feel more comfortable making this loan if they did section 2 repairs also, or whatever. That's just kind of an example. But there's things that underwriting will ask for. Maybe they'll say, we've looked at the buyer's credit report and we see they've got 3 or 4 revolving charge cards. We'd feel a lot better about making this loan if they would pay off their Macy's and their Sears card or their MasterCard and bring down their debt so that they have a little more of a comfort zone in making that new house payment. Underwriting can do things like that. They can make conditions where something has to happen. And until it gets to underwriting, that's the last process before loan documents are drawn. You don't know what's going to happen. And there isn't always something that happens in underwriting, but sometimes there is.
So you tell the seller just like, just be aware if it's going to be delayed because of
Yes.
you know, the lender or underwriter,
Yeah.
underwriter
Underwriting.
that finds something
Yeah.
that could delay the process.
Right. Yeah. You just never know along the way what's going to happen. We're hoping for it to be very smooth and just like clockwork. And oftentimes it goes that way, but we always have to be prepared for that what if. Because if we aren't prepared for it, as sure as the world, that's when it's going to happen. So it's better to talk to a seller and prepare them. Because the things that make sellers and buyers both unhappy are surprises. So if you can alleviate a surprise by saying, this could happen, we're going to try to prevent it.
Can I move out sooner?
You could move out sooner. Our recommendation as a broker is even if the seller is gone, we don't recommend letting a buyer move in.
Okay.
There are times when that happens or has to happen, but it's never our recommendation.
Would it be safe, the house, if I left early?
Well, that's the other thing. Sometimes it's a toss-up because any house that's vacant these days is vulnerable.
Okay.
So it just depends.
No matter where it's at.
Yes, no matter where it is, the best neighborhood out in the country, the worst neighborhood. There's always some drug addict that needs a fix, and copper's a great way to. So it's just amazing what they will do to properties.
We had 2 foreclosures next to each other. So we kicked the guy out of this house, and then he'd sneak into the other house. And then by the time we figured out he was in the other house, we had to kick him out of that one. We did it 3 times at least. So, anyway.
Yeah. So it's a challenge. And the hardest time of the whole escrow is right at the end because everybody's emotional and everybody's ready to do something. And they've got deadlines and timelines, and they've got family that's going to help, or they've got pets that they don't know what to do with. There's always something.
Moving companies, they're very difficult to get. Without 2 weeks notice.
Yeah.
When you're trying to time it, that's what it called close every time.
Yes.
Oh, because when you close it, the day of closing, generally that's when the buyer gets the keys and expects to move in. So you have to be out
Yes.
before, yeah, so that's.
Or that day.
So should I ask that?
No, I'm gonna tell you.
Okay, good.
Here's what I'm gonna tell you.
For that date,
That was a while back.
That doesn't happen very often, or does it happen
He's
more
lucky I
times?
helped him because he wasn't my client. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh, they can't. You can't hear any
No.
of the conversation?
No.
Yes, that's unfortunate. Okay, here's what part of the discussion we're going to have with the seller. During our escrow, we have 2 due diligence time periods, one for the buyer and one for the seller. For the seller, we've got 7 days. Once we get an accepted offer to do everything we need to do for that buyer,
Okay.
that the seller has to do. We have to get any report that we promised to get for them. Our preliminary title report from escrow. We have to open escrow first, get the prelim, the natural hazard disclosure, which if we have that already, we'll just pass that on to them. Anything that we're supposed to do, we've got 7 days to do it.
Do we have to do another pest control?
No.
Okay, good.
No, the buyer has a total of 17 days.
Okay.
They've got 10 days beyond our 7 days to do what they need to do. And most buyers are going to get a home inspection, so they're going to make an appointment with a home inspector. We'll make an appointment with you, hopefully at a time that's convenient for everybody, to come in and do their inspection. That home inspector probably is going to be here a minimum of 2 hours, and depending on the home inspector and the size of the home, they may be there 4 hours or more. It just depends.
Okay.
They're
Do I need
very-
to be there too?
You don't need to be.
Okay.
I will always be there to greet
Okay.
that home inspector. The buyer's agent may be there to greet that home inspector. We want to make it as easy for you as possible, but they're very thorough. They're going to go look in the attic. They're going to be underneath the house if there's, unless it's a slab.
Yeah, it's a slab.
Okay, so they won't go under that. but they're going to be everywhere looking around, okay? If there's a roof inspection, that roofer has to have an appointment to come over. Buyer has to get everything done during those 17 days. Once those 17 days are up, the buyer has a choice according to what it says on the contract. The buyer either has to give the seller a contingency removal or a cancellation, okay? So we're going to assume that everything's going to be okay with them, and they're going to give us a contingency removal. Their loan has 21 days, so another few days after that first contingency removal, they should be removing their loan contingency too, okay? Once those contingencies are removed, that's your green light to get everything packed up. And truthfully, I would start as soon as you get an accepted offer, pack away the little things that you don't really need and begin that process. And if you're going to have a professional mover, you do need to get on their schedule. And I can give you some hints for if you're going to have a professional mover. Find out what their schedule is and find out, they're going to come and do an estimate for you. Find out how much of that van your stuff will take up.
Okay.
If they're going to have somebody else's stuff on that van, you want theirs to be picked up first. You want to be the last on the van and the first off.
Oh, okay.
Very important. Okay.
And if it falls through, do I get to keep the deposit?
Well, that is questionable. It depends on when that happens, and it depends on a lot of things. If that buyer backs out anytime before the end of their contingency period, we pretty much have to give them their money back,
Okay.
their earnest money. If something happens after that due diligence, and let's say they've removed their contingencies, that earnest money is in jeopardy, but it doesn't automatically go to you. You have to ask them for it. You have to negotiate for it. If they say, no, we're not going to give it to you, and you think that you deserve it, nobody can make a decision except the buyer and seller together. Me as an agent, our brokerage, our company, the escrow company, an attorney, nobody can make that decision except the buyer and seller. And if they can't come to an agreement, then one party has to file a small claims court.
Okay.
You say that's after the 17 day,
After,
then the money can be integrated, right?
Excuse me, Beth. You're not using an email that's hosted by Catherine Sawaski, right?
no,
Okay, none of those emails, right?
no,
Okay.
You're welcome.
I was just thinking, because if I tie up my house and I have other
Yes,
contingency plans,
yes.
I just want to know. Okay.
Okay, yeah, it isn't very often that we get into a situation where somebody has to go to court, but every once in a while we do, and I can tell you what the courts are going to look for to help you make decisions too.
Okay.
The judge is going to look at how you've been injured as a seller. If you get another offer right away and you're proceeding to sell your house, the judge is going to perceive that you haven't really been injured. Okay. If it's a declining market, the judge is going to look at how much the value has come down from the time you accepted the first offer and where you are at that point. And then there's a couple of other factors that go into it. It has to do with liquidated damages, and I'll explain that to you on the purchase agreement. But if the liquidated damages has been initialed in the purchase agreement,
Oh,
then that is a predetermined amount of damages. It's the most that the seller can go for if both people have initialed that. If they haven't initialed it, then you can take that information to court, and you can take any documentation you have, like receipts for repairs that you've done and things like that.
Got it.
And that judge may say, yes, you've been injured, and you can get more than what the earnest money is.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Otherwise, at the closing, the buyer has the right to come in and do a final verification, a final walkthrough. We encourage that. It's an opportunity for a buyer to make sure if any repairs were done, that the repairs were done in good workmanship, and to make sure that the house is in essentially the same condition as when the offer was made. So you got to keep watering, keep mowing, don't let anything die in the yard, that kind of thing. And if there's anything that happens in the house, let's just say, as an example, a pipe breaks and you're away for the weekend and you have some water damage, we have to let the buyer know about anything like that. And they have an opportunity to explore that damage, and if they feel that's irreparable or it has created a situation for them that they've lost confidence in the house, they would have a right to back out.
Okay.
Like I say, things like that don't happen very often, but every once in a while. So you never know. Okay. So we're going to be ready to go then a week from Friday, week from
Okay.
tomorrow.
I'm excited.
Good, me too. I probably will have the photographer come over maybe next Wednesday.
Okay,
Would that be good?
sure.
Okay, yeah. All right,
All righty then.
good. I'm going to leave you a stack of my cards. And if anybody should come up or want some information or whatever, then you'll have my card that you can give to them. Once I get some brochures done, I'll leave you a stack of brochures. And I know they said we aren't supposed to be doing that now, but this coronavirus thing isn't going to last forever. So we'll have a stack of brochures there, and the sign will go up. The sign man will come out, and if you have a place that you don't want him to put the sign or you think it might be best, he's always open to suggestions.
Okay.
A lot of times they have to watch for underground water lines for sprinkler systems. Okay. Good. Well, I'm anticipating that we're going to get a quick sale. We're going to do everything that we can. We didn't talk about open houses. I don't know how you feel about open
Oh, no,
houses.
I'm okay with that.
Are you?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. I will try to do some. We have agents in our company that like to do open houses. Would you be okay with that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Good. Great. Call me anytime with any question. Another thing I want you to know, I think communication is extremely important. And it's usually one of the things that most people will find lacking in their agent. I will call you anytime I have something to tell you, but I will also make a weekly call, and I usually do my calls on Wednesday afternoons.
Okay.
I'm going to call you if you aren't at home or I can't reach you. I'm going to leave you a voicemail, or I may send you a text. I may send you an email and just check in with you because I want you to hear from me.
Okay. That would be wonderful.
Good. We'll keep those lines of communication open. Okay. Good.
All righty.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Any questions? Anybody?
Yeah, this is the time that you will do the listing packet, right?
Yes. Yeah. We'll have the listing packet and we'll go over the listing agreement, and I probably would leave the disclosures. I'd show them what they are and tell them what they have to do. Because next week when we do disclosures, I'm going to tell you that as an agent, you never hold the pen and fill out those forms yourself. There's too much liability. If that seller doesn't speak the language, let's say, and they have to have an interpreter, they have to have their own interpreter. And if they have a disability where maybe they've had a stroke or something and they can't write anymore, and somebody has to help them, it can't be you.
Right, like a power of attorney or something?
Well, it could be a family member, it could be a next door neighbor, just anybody but you. Because as sure as the world, they're gonna say, I didn't tell that person to put that on there. So they can blame the neighbor. You don't want them to blame you because that's lawsuits and dollars. Yeah.
Is it this time that you did, and when we were talking, a copy of the listing agreement?
Yes.
Is it this time or the first time?
Well, the first time you can give them a copy of it, a sample, so they can review. But when you are actually filling out the listing agreement with them and getting them to sign it, you're going to have 2 copies and they get a copy right away. California state law says we have to provide a copy of anything a buyer or a seller signs at the time that they sign it. Yeah. Probably will be on your test. Yeah, it is. Yep. Yeah.
If the house owned by different, you have to keep the property. People own that property.
Oh, yes, then you have to give everybody a copy. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what one.
Yeah. Unless it's a married couple and they live together. Now, if they're getting a divorce and they don't live in the same house, then you'd still give each person a copy
Of the disclosure forms and everything?
of everything.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. Okay.
So then generally when we have them signing that listing agreement and all that, you have 2 copies, you just have them sign both of them.
Yes. Yeah.
And you read one.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's just easier that way. Yeah. That way everything matches. Yeah. Do you know the reason why you do it at the time and not later? Because there's always the possibility that somebody could add something in. Either way, buyer, seller, agent. And this way everything matches. And that's very important if you ever go to court. You want everything to match.
I think the digital signature is far superior. Some of them have timestamps, right?
Yes. Yeah, they do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then do you take hard copies or do you have them sign it?
I take a hard copy and leave it with them, and then I send them the sign, I email them the signed copy.
Oh.
Immediately.
Yeah.
I store everything in Dropbox. So I actually have a hard copy and a digital copy because sometimes I'll be up and down.
Good.
It's all this technology.
It's all ready.
Good. Okay, Dominic and Mai, thank you very much. And next week, we're going to be doing contracts and disclosures. So we'll see you then. Bye.
Thank you, Marsha.
You're welcome, Mai. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.